You have to act on the truth. You have to act on the true understanding. You don't act on the false belief
Mm-hmm.
and take that as your model. You act on the truth. So there are times when if you're afraid to take a step forward and your actions are not actually demonstrating what you want to be true, it's like wishing, wanting, hoping is different from knowing. Wishing, wanting,
Mm.
hoping is different from committing to
Mm.
understanding, demonstrating.
Mm.
So we are the ones that need to shift if we're going to act in accordance with what's true. A lot of times we need to shift into that place of claiming confidence, clarity, that affirming, like where people talk about affirmations, affirming
Mm-hmm.
what is true about me, even if I don't quite believe it yet,
Mm.
even if I haven't quite demonstrated yet. Claim it and then step confidently out to demonstrate it. And the more we claim it first and then express it, the more we're going to see the evidence follow the thought. It's like it builds on itself. When you have the capacity to do it, it's in the doing that we find our path is another one of my
Mm.
little
Yes.
phrases.
Yes.
It's in the being that we find the doing, it's in the doing that we find the path.
Papaya! Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Transform Your Future with me, Eddie Eisen, where I sit down with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and high achievers as they identify areas I can improve on and guide me to further my self improvement practice. For more information and insights, join the newsletter at transformyourfuture.com. Today's guest is spiritual practitioner Lisa Taylor. Lisa is the founder of This Choice Matters. She is an award winning speaker and author. And as a spiritual practitioner, she helps truth seekers follow divine intuition by following three simple steps: look up, look in, and look out. Lisa is a former news anchor, producer, educator, communications director, and lifelong student of spiritual law. Lisa now leads clients to freedom from pain, professional, mental, physical, emotional, relational, financial, to look up, discover clarity about their true spiritual nature based on their higher power, look in to connect with their courage, consistency, and confidence to live in alignment with spiritual law, and look out to courageously act on their understanding and contribute their unique brilliance to a world in need of their gifts. Welcome, Lisa Taylor.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Good. Good. It's actually
I,
been a really good day. It's been busy, but good.
I really appreciate you taking the time out so that we could talk about looking up, looking in, and looking out. I love it. You're so speaking my language. Why don't you just go ahead and begin and tell me a little bit about that process?
Well, I can tell you that this phrase, look up, look in, look out, came to me when I was prepping for a workshop I was doing called Paths of Practice. I have a community of people who are very spiritually minded, and the importance of a daily practice is something that I am a big fan of and I promote. So I was doing this free workshop for a bunch of people, Paths of Practice, like what is your practice and what does it look like and what's your daily thing? And I didn't have my in. It's like I wasn't sure how was I going to start this thing. So I went for this walk and I just kind of tuned into my intuition, which is, as you'll hear in this conversation, something that I've done all my life. And I was just kind of walking along and had a couple of really cool experiences along the way, helped somebody find a pizza place. And it was just like lots of synchronicities. And I heard this phrase, look up, look in, look out. And I thought, oh, that's cool. What is that? And then I started thinking about it and realized, oh, that's my in. And the more I worked with the phrase, the more I realized, oh, you know what it is? It's actually the two great commandments. Look
Mm.
up to a higher power whatever you
Mm-hmm.
call that, whether you call that God or, Jesus or a rock or the Buddha or whatever you call that. I happen to call it God, but plug in whatever works for you. Look up to that higher power, acknowledge that there's a power bigger than us, look in and recognize that we've been created by something larger than us, love, and that we get to choose how we view ourselves. We know how the divine views us, created us, but how do we view ourselves? And is our view in alignment with how the divine sees us? And then
Mm.
look out, let the expression of me line up with who I really am, and let my view of others line up with who they really are. So that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not second guessing. I have a consistent way of going forward. And then it works in the reverse too, which is really cool. And not many people know this. But if a lot of times, if we're having struggles with life, it's something out there, what looks like out there,
Right.
and we're struggling with something. And then we reach out and try to change it. We try to change that person. We try to
Mm.
fix the circumstance. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, there's nothing out there. It's all in consciousness. So if
Mm.
there's a problem out there, when I look out, the fix is not going out, the fix is going in and
Mm-hmm.
shifting the way I'm viewing it rather than shifting them. Because
Mm-hmm.
my human consciousness equals my human experience. It's going to be reflected outwardly. And if
Mm.
I am still kind of seeing disconnect when I look in, look up. Then I go back to the source and I see, okay, what's the fix? How do I fix looking in? If that's wonky, then I look up and I fix it looking up. So this has been, I realized as I kind of look back over my life, once this download came, that I've always done this from the time I was a little kid. I've always had a very strong yearning to understand the divine. And that's been my path since I was really little, itty bitty,
Mm.
and have just had some really amazing experiences listening to that still small voice. We all have it. It all comes built in. It's like built in navigation. And I just remember I was like 5 years old and I was sitting in the blue chair in front of the black and white TV, which kind of dates me. And with the bunny ears on it and the little UVF. Yeah. So I'm sitting there in this blue chair. I'm like 5 years old, and I had just learned in Sunday school, I think, that God is all and God is everywhere. And I was sitting there by myself, there's nobody around. It's like, God, if you're everywhere, are you here right now? And I was like really expectant, and I felt something
The
hold my hand.
presence.
Yeah, I felt something actually hold my hand. Like I
Mm-hmm.
felt my hand being held, and I thought, oh wow, that's God. And it's like I feel like I think about it now, and I actually feel it. And so I've always had this real closeness with the divine and a presence of love that is really powerful and palpable. And when we have that oneness with that acknowledgement of something beyond us that's good, that's loving, it shifts us. It changes us. We can trust, we can feel more hopeful, we can heal whatever is going on.
Mm-hmm.
We invite in that law of goodness that is governing. When
Mm.
we acknowledge that, we can live by it. So all my life I've done that, and I have really trusted my intuition to guide me in everything. And um, you know, moving out of my home with my mom, I moved out to live with friends when I was 15, like 2,000 miles away. And my mom was like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, you know what? I just feel like it's right. Do you trust me that I'm listening to divine guidance? She said, "Yeah, I
Mm.
trust that." I said, "Okay, then you can trust that I'm doing this." And then I
Mm.
went out and got a job and worked, and um, it was a whole summer. It was a great experience. I was young.
Mm.
People thought I was 16 and they hired me, so that was good. So I got to make money. That was
Mm-hmm.
good. It was
Mm-hmm.
good that that worked out. But
Your first
I,
big adventure.
yeah, well, yeah, there were probably more than that. But I one of my first adventures of really trusting this law was skiing with my dad. My parents got divorced when I was 8, and I went skiing with my dad after they were split, and there was a sort of we had a choice of what healing modality we'd use. My mom was very spiritually based. My dad was medically based because his dad was a surgeon. So I always chose prayer as my first aid, and I knew the medical was available as my second aid, but I always went with prayer. My dad said, if they're not healed in 3 days, I'm taking them to the doctor. If it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for them. It's like, okay. But I was always healed. So we were skiing, and I got into a skiing accident and fractured my leg. And dad took me to the hospital, got the x-rays. They said, it's hairline fracture, so you don't need a cast, but stay off of it for 6 weeks. Your skiing season is over. And I went to the place where we were staying that night, and I just thought, okay, I was maybe 10 or 11. It's pretty young. It was the first time I was really kind of on my own in prayer, and just turned to God and said, okay, God, what do I need to know here? What do I really know about myself? Am I this like hunk of matter, or am I this idea? Like, am I an idea,
Mhm.
like God's idea?
Mhm.
And I really focused on what Genesis 1 says, that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and that God is spirit. So if God is spirit, it can't be matter and spirit. It's got to be spirit.
Mhm.
Anyway, I was just reasoned it through as a kid. I don't remember exactly all the reasoning, but I felt kind of a click in my leg, went to bed, slept, got up the next morning, jumped out of bed, got ready to go skiing, and then went, oh yeah, there was, and then like testing my legs, like it was fine. I skied that day. So it was like
Mhm.
it was kind of a cool demonstration as a kid to just realize, oh, this is powerful stuff, and I can rely on this.
Mhm.
Because we were out in the middle of the boonies, there was nothing around. It was like, okay, so no matter where I am, no matter who's around, there's a power that I can access that's divine,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
supersedes anything else that's going on,
Mhm.
and get results. So that was kind of cool.
Mhm.
So then that was kind of a health thing. But I've utilized this in every area of my life. Every major relationship I've ever had, it's been guided by intuition. Every house I've lived in, every place, every apartment, every house, guided by that still small voice to find it.
Mhm.
Every job I've ever had, like my whole career, or the several different careers I've had, every single juncture has been guided by intuition. I have like
Mhm.
lots of stories, but
Mhm.
everything,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I think I identify what you're saying, and I think for me and probably for other people, when I was younger, I also felt very connected to this power for good, this force for good in the universe, this connection to all living things, and this entity, this spiritual idea that there is a higher power that's all knowing, all loving, all powerful. And I remember being connected to that and feeling God's presence in my life. But as I got older, I pulled away from that and, went off into trying to just make myself have whatever I wanted to have, do whatever I wanted to do, and whatever. And of course, there was excess involved in my situation, but I imagine there's other people who just move away from that and forget about it. And
Yeah.
so maybe have to be reminded again, right? Something to
Well,
happen to remember.
that's why I think having a daily spiritual practice is really important. And whatever you call that, there are certain elements of it that no matter what faith tradition you're in or no faith tradition, you'll find the same kind of elements that come up. Being taking time to be silent, you can call it meditation, you can call it prayer, whatever you want to call that. Just being still, be still and
Hmm.
know that I am God. Being out in nature, taking time to be in nature and be in the greater arena of reality that is speaking truth all the time. Spending
Hmm.
time with animals and plants and nature and seeing the beauty of life. Having that some input of inspiration, whether it be scripture or inspirational text or some interesting knowledge that you're
Hmm.
interested in looking at,
Hmm.
reading good books, so there are elements of it, having a sense of discipline and a daily routine. So if you look at any kind of high performance coaches, it's always the same elements that are
Mhm.
in the daily practice.
Mhm.
It's starting the day the night before, not the morning of. It's being
Mhm.
prepared. It's thinking ahead and saying, okay. And it's also for your daily practice being in the moment, not
Mhm.
thinking in the future or in the past, not hanging on to
Mhm.
all the stories, not worrying about the future. I heard this really good definition of worry: ingratitude in advance. Isn't that great? I really like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but so there's, elements of a daily practice, but committing to that. When I was in 7th grade, and as I said, I always loved God and went to Sunday school and was always interested in learning more of God. And in 7th grade, my mom said, I know you really like this stuff. Why don't you sit down before you go off to school and just read a little bit of the Bible or read a little bit of the spiritual text and then go off to school? And so I thought, okay. So this one day, I remember sitting down on the edge of my bed for like 5 minutes, just kind of opened randomly and read stuff. And then went off and had a day. And this was 7th grade when, junior high is, we all know junior high. We know and
It's
love junior high.
brutal.
It's brutal. It's like when we
Mhm.
trip over our own feet and everything's horrible. That day was like the perfect day. It's like I said all the right stuff. I ran into all the right people. I did well on all my tests. Like and I thought, wow, if taking 5 minutes at the beginning of my day gets me this, I'm doing this every day. And that
Mhm.
started my daily practice. And I was committed. And
Mm.
I can probably count on one hand the number of days when I haven't done a very specific daily practice in the morning. And that honestly, I think has changed my life because
Mhm.
it is mental metaphysical training. Just like we get up and we work out, getting some exercise is another thing that we
Mhm.
do. We move our body, but it's spiritual fitness and
Mhm.
mental
Mhm.
fitness, and spiritual fitness is just as important as physical fitness, and yet we don't teach
Yeah.
it in school. So, which is
Yeah.
interesting. We don't teach young people, oh yeah, well, I mean, some people do, but it's more, I would say, more important to be spiritually fit than it is to be physically fit, because the physical follows the spiritual, not the other way around. And we always, a lot of times we get it backwards because we live in what looks like this very solid universe, which isn't solid at all. It's all
Mm.
consciousness, and quantum physics, says there's no matter. No, there is no matter. It's all spirit, it's all consciousness. And we get to acknowledge that and then live in that arena with that understanding, and understand that we have the ability to shift our experience by shifting our thought. And everyone's doing it backwards. It's kind of like we see the earth at the center instead of the sun. We see
Mm.
ourselves at the center instead of
Right.
God.
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
put it in the right order and then everything works out.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this spiritual practice in my life for 36 years. I have no idea what my life would be without it. I know I'd be
Yeah.
lost probably. I know I'd be living in doubt all the time. I'd be second guessing myself. You know, I wouldn't have a solution for, life. In life, we have real challenges that arise, right? People die, people get sick. This is what really happens. And so, how would I be able to deal with all that, losing a job, losing a house, or something like that, if I didn't have some foundation in this spirituality to know that I'm going to be okay no matter what happens because God's got me,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
just don't know how you could live without that.
Well, and I love, Mandela to me is one of those people that just was embodied this sense of higher understanding affecting a life. And when he was in prison for 27 years, he never felt imprisoned. It
Mm,
never imprisoned him in his mind and in his
mhm,
spirit.
mhm,
And he still led a country from inside
mhm,
prison.
mhm.
And that, physically our bodies can be restrained, or some problem can be
Yes.
exhibited,
Yeah.
but we can overcome that. We can overcome that by knowing who we are and demonstrating who we are. If you can
Mhm.
see who you are, you can be who you are. If you
I
can't see
love
who
that.
you are, then you got to get that straight first. Because no matter how many programs you go to, or self-help things, or transformational whatever, if you don't actually see who you are, none of that matters. You can, buy different marketing systems and different business programs and all these things to add to ourselves. But if we don't know who we are on the inside, it's just like layering on the outside and it
Hmm.
doesn't do anything.
Yeah, change relationships, change jobs, change
Yeah.
locations, right?
Yep.
You do all these different things, but if you don't work on the inside,
Yep.
then you're still the same person, just going through all those same things again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Because you show up, you are the common denominator. you're
Hmm.
you're gonna show up in the next relationship. You're
Oh
gonna show
yeah.
up in the next job. You're gonna show up. And if it's not working, something to fix. Yeah.
So before we go into more about look in, which I want to hear you talk about that for sure, with the lookup, how do people often fight against that idea? Do
Well,
people do,
mostly the people that come into my community are already wanting that, and so there's
mhm,
an eagerness
mhm,
to sort of find out, how do I hear God's voice? Like, how
mm,
do I tune into my intuition? What is that still small
mhm,
voice? And
mhm,
there's it's important for people to know that it's individual. It's not like one size fits all. It's like the voice within you is for you. It's your the still small voice within you. So it's going to speak in your language. It's going to speak at the level that you are. So if you need to hear somebody speak in, street talk, you're going to hear it in street talk. If you need to hear it in some eloquent, sort of highfalutin, highly educated, you're going to hear it that way. Like, whatever language you need to hear it in, you're going to hear it. It's going to come in a way that
mm,
you can understand it and that you can take it in. It's kind of like water finding its own level and
mm,
finding it'll take the shape of whatever it is. So it's a very fluid, the spirit. I mean, it is the
mm,
spirit. So it's going to reach you where you are and reach your heart where you are. So one, understand that it's individually yours and that this is something where it's built in. So one of the things too is to recognize, how does it come to you? Do you hear ideas? Do you feel the ideas? Do you feel it? Is it sort of an intuitive sense that you feel? Does it come in signs like seeing billboards or license plates or friends saying stuff, or do you hear conversations going by? It can come in any form, but recognizing how it shows up for you. Do you see images? Like, I see images a lot, or I have
mm,
visions at night, and I distinguish between a vision and a dream. Dreams are like the human consciousness kind of processing thoughts from the day.
mhm,
Visions are, if I ask a question before I go to bed and I expect an answer, I'll have a vision at night and I'll get an
mm,
answer in a vision. And
mhm,
I'll see images, or I'll hear a voice or something, but I'll get an answer. And you can it's like when the Bible says, ask and you shall receive, knock and it
mm,
will be opened unto you, seek and you shall find.
mhm,
It's like, all you have to do is ask.
mm,
Just ask that still small voice that's in you. So recognize that you have a still small voice, recognize that it's uniquely yours, recognize that there is a specific way that you hear it, and get to know what that is. Because there's this wonderful, I have this plaque over the guest bed in this room. It says, God whispers and the world is loud. It's
mm.
like we need to be still enough and quiet our human chatter enough
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
can actually hear that small voice that is not emotional, not judgmental, it's not manipulative or coercive. It's very clear, it's calm, it's usually quite singular. It's not a whole bunch of information all at once. It's usually one step at a time.
Mm,
And know what it is, know what it isn't, and be in tune with that. So know what, when do I hear it? Who am I being when I hear it? Am I being still? Am I being quiet? Am I not
mhm,
talking?
mhm,
Like, do I need to be in a quiet place? And as you practice it, you get better at it, so that even in the midst of turmoil, you can be the calm amidst the storm. Even with everything going on around you, you can still tune into it because you know how. But it takes
mm,
practice. So not getting discouraged. and
Mhm.
do what I call the blue feather experiment, where you
Yes.
know, you ask to see something, you ask to see a sign, and then you wait and you're patient until you see it. And then you go, okay. And then notice how it comes through.
Mm.
And I was actually leading a whole group of people through that. And I had said blue, and I actually was asking to see a blue feather, and I hadn't seen my blue feather, and it'd been like days. It's like, well, am I going to see
Mm.
my blue feather? And then I'm out walking. It was several days later. I traveled from one city to another, and I was out walking, and I looked down, and there's this very blue feather right in my path, and I thought, okay,
Mm.
there's that blue feather. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a blue feather. That actually comes from the book Illusions, the
Mm.
Richard Bach book, where he
Mhm.
and Donald Shimoda and the reluctant Messiah, he talks about this, and he ends up seeing like blue feather dairy on some thing on the table. It was like,
Mm.
so it can come not necessarily a blue feather. It came in words for him.
I
So
think that I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome because I'm just thinking like there's a bunch of people I've worked with in the past that I've tried to share this idea with, and they have trouble distinguishing what it is and how it works. And this is such. I was going to ask you what would be a good tip for them, and the blue feather is an excellent tip.
yeah, yeah, just
Yes.
try it. Like
Mm-hmm.
experiment with it. Don't be afraid to kind of mush it up and throw it against the wall and say,
Mm-hmm.
well, if this is a science, because this is like divine science,
Mm-hmm.
it's not it's I mean quantum science and quantum healing and the quantum realm is like one level. This is like the next level up. It's like we're taking quantum healing and quantum transformation, and we're like raising it a level and saying, okay, let's take it all the way to the divine. And
Mm-hmm.
it gets out of anything that's material, even energy. Like you can talk a lot of people talk about energy. This
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
divine flow. This is beyond
Mm-hmm.
energetics. It's beyond human consciousness. It's divine mind, divine intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So, tuning into that, all of the other limitations that we know of from the five physical senses and the three dimensions, all of that drop away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, I mean, if you look at the Bible and you look at Jesus' healings, he was like a really scientific guy. He
Mm-hmm.
broke every physical law. He broke the law of birth, broke the law of death, broke the laws of time and space, like appeared in a locked room a couple different times, just appeared in the midst of them and the room had been locked.
Mm-hmm.
He broke the law, like broke all the societal laws, broke all the religious laws. Like he broke every law because
Mm-hmm.
he was governed by a higher law and he lived by a higher law. Why could he heal? When the leper says, if thou wilt, would you make me whole? Like, will you make me clean? I know you can. And he says, be thou clean. And instantly the leprosy is gone. It's like, well, how does
Mm-hmm.
that happen if he's not operating on a higher law? He sees that individual not as a leper with a physical problem that needs to be overcome, that takes time and treatment and
Mm-hmm.
cleansing and different things, but as this is an idea of God. This is a child of God in front of me. And I see who that is. I'm not seeing a hunk of matter with a problem. I'm seeing a divine idea. And
Mm-hmm.
he saw that so clearly, it was instantaneously manifest. Power of God.
Yes.
So, and he said, and greater works than these shall you do. So we go, okay, so what does that mean? Well, we got to understand this divine science, these
Mhm.
divine laws. And if we live by and lean on these divine laws, we can demonstrate the same. And that's the path that I've been on for a lot of years. Just studying this divine law, practicing it. Just a couple of days ago, I've been doing this new workout routine and doing these things. There's this one exercise where and I tweaked something in my shoulder blade. It was like, and it was a pinched nerve or a tweaked muscle or I don't know what. And I was getting these shooting pains like up my neck. And I thought, okay, practice what you preach, Lisa. Like you're not a hunk of matter dealing with a physical pain. What are you? And and so I started thinking about, there's a line in this book, and I know you're going to ask me like, what is a book that you would recommend? And there's this book that I've grown up with. It's about this spiritual law, It's called Science and Health. And the full title is With Key to the Scriptures, because it's based on the healings that Jesus demonstrated. It's like, what's the science behind those healings? And how can we demonstrate that too? So it's called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And it's by this woman, Mary Baker Eddy. And in there, she talks about Christian science, this science of the Christ, Christian science, also known as divine science or spiritual science, or lots of different names, that it relaxes rigid muscles, restores carious bones to soundness. And there's this one passage, and I thought, okay, if the divine law can relax rigid muscles, what's actually happening? Like, I'm not taking this divine law and applying it to matter, because there is no matter. It's just consciousness. So what's actually happening is divine law thought is shifting from being based in a sense of myself that's material, that I'm just this hunk of bones and blood and all these things, muscles, to a spiritual idea. Well, a spiritual idea can't be affected by physical stuff. And the more I really just thought through this and thought, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. It's like, okay. So as my thought shifted to the reality of me, the spiritual reality of me, the pain lessened. As my thought would go back to thinking about myself and my body, the pain would increase. If I thought, oh, I have a pulled muscle or I have a tweaked nerve or whatever, I would start to feel the pain again. Then I thought, wait a second, that's not who I am. I am a spiritual idea of God. And I just claimed it, and the pain would lessen. And I would go back and forth just to do an experiment to see how much is my thought governing my experience. Well, then you go, okay, well, there's a very direct relationship there. And the fear that there would be something wrong with me is kind of at the root of that being a problem. Because there's a belief that if you tweak a muscle, it's like cause and effect. Cause, tweaked muscle, effect, pain. But if that belief weren't there, would the pain be there? If I didn't fear that that was a problem, would there actually be pain there? It's like when they do experiments with nocebos and placebos, and they say, if you take this pill, and there's actually no medicine in it at all, and they get better. Well, it's the belief that the pill will make you better. It's not the pill itself, right?
Yes.
And they've done countless experiments like that. So it's the thought. And there's this wonderful quote from this guy, Jack Hubble. We're not dealing with a real problem. We're dealing with a belief that the problem is real. It's such a good quote, because we're not dealing with a real problem in matter. We're dealing with a belief that that problem is real. So if I don't believe the problem is real, and you look at that quote from Shakespeare where he says, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Like, if I don't think this is a problem, is it going to be a problem? So the more I identified myself as whole, complete, spiritual idea, which that identity, spiritual, cannot be affected by anything material. And honestly, I don't remember when the healing actually was complete, because I just stopped. It's kind of like mental surgery. Like, that thought that I had a problem was just removed from consciousness. I didn't think of it anymore, because I was so dwelling on who I am truly. And the pain, and I don't even remember when it stopped hurting, but it went away, and it never came back, because I stopped kind of going back and forth and experimenting with it. Thought, oh, I like it better this way when it's not hurting. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that, and I've written about that in different ways. And in one way, it's kind of like, what you're saying, this idea that if you the story that you tell yourself, you have to ask yourself, is that really the truth? Is that really the true story? Oftentimes you get labeled in situations. Like when I was first labeled that I'm disabled and that I have all these problems and I had to have these surgeries and stuff, like, do I accept this label and I accept the limitations that these people are giving me? Or can I overcome these limitations, right? And so it's very much about belief and what you choose to believe. And it's so simple in some respects.
Yep.
It's so very simple.
It's totally simple. There was an experience. I just keep sharing stories, so cut me off if I share too many. But I was in Africa on a work assignment. This is years ago, and chose not to take sort of malaria pills and sort of take the prophylactic
Mm,
approach of that, and decided I'm going to use prayer as my protection.
mm,
But I was diligent in praying about it every day, and
mhm,
recognizing, and what I mean by that was claiming who I truly was. So looking up and saying, okay, I know who God is and I know God is in control. Looking in, understanding my identity as a reflection of that. So nothing could come in and harm me and couldn't change my thought of myself. And then looking out and seeing my experience reflect that. So
mm,
I was flying from Boston to London and then London to Nigeria. And when I got to London, I realized I left because legally we had to get yellow fever vaccinations to get into the country. And I'd left my certificate at home.
mm,
So when I was in London, I mean, it's all sort of ridiculous because to get a vaccine like that, you have to get it 2 weeks ahead of time for it to be effective. So I had to get it in London to actually get to fly to Nigeria. So I got another one, which was again not something that you would normally do. So I had a dose of it, flew to Nigeria, did the work there, I don't know, a week or so, and then flew to Kenya. And there's some belief around that if you go to altitude, it incubates faster or whatever. So when I landed in Kenya, I went immediately into a focus group and was doing interviews, and I got hit with, I don't know if it was yellow fever or malaria. I don't know. I never had it diagnosed, but it's an extreme case of fever, whatever it was, and was passing out, standing there interviewing somebody with a microphone, was like leaning against a tree, passing out. Made it back to the
mhm,
hotel and literally passed out, like was out,
mhm,
and
mhm,
really thought I was going to die. It felt really bad. So
mm,
I got a call out to the United States. This was back in the 80s. I got a call out to the United States to work with a spiritual practitioner who would pray for me. And I just remember passing out and was out for, I don't know, half a day. 10 hours later, I think I woke up. And I thought I was going to die until this thought came to me. And this is what happens when you have somebody praying for you. The thought comes to you that you need. Like what I was saying in the beginning of our conversation, that still small voice comes in the form that you can understand and that you need. And the image that came to me, because I thought it was malaria, I don't know exactly what it was, but the image that came to me was a mosquito biting my arm. And I thought, well, it could a mosquito biting my arm change the way I feel about God or the way God feels about me? And it was
mm,
so ludicrous that that would even have any effect at all on how I felt about God or
mhm,
God felt about me. It made me laugh out loud. And as soon
mm,
as I laughed, because it was like, well, duh, no, of course not, the
mm,
fever broke. Like I felt the fever draining out of my body. And up to that point, I truly was like afraid of dying. I thought I was going home in a
mhm,
box. And
mhm,
it broke the fear. And one of the things that you learn in spiritual practice is underlying every problem, there's some element of fear.
mhm,
And if you can get rid of the fear, then the healing is going to take place. So
mhm,
the fear was gone and the healing was instantaneous. And
mhm,
then the belief of that disease is that it's cyclical and it'll come back in 10 days or 20, whatever the cycle is.
yeah,
So a couple of other times on this trip, the symptoms came rushing back. And all I did was reaffirm what I knew to be true. Like, I know that these physical symptoms, the physical circumstances, have nothing to do, cannot have any effect on my love of God or God's love for me. And the symptoms would go away. And that happened like two or
mm,
three times, and then they never came back again. But it was instantly
wow,
handled. It wasn't,
yeah,
uh-oh, here it comes, I'm afraid. And I start letting the thought take over my consciousness and take it
mhm,
on as who I am, and then start feeling all the effects of that. There's a
mhm,
line in Science and Health, stand porter at the door of thought,
mhm, mhm,
and admit
yes,
only such conclusions as you wish realized in bodily results. Like,
mhm,
don't let come in the door, and don't admit to yourself, you can read it both ways,
mhm,
anything that you don't want to see the result of. Don't
Mhm.
admit, okay, I have this problem. Whatever follows, and this is, a phrase that a lot of people are familiar with, whatever follows I am comes looking for you.
Mm.
Like, don't
I love
admit
that.
anything that you don't want to see realized. So I'm not going to say I am sick or I am, it's like whatever follows I am, if it wouldn't be true about God, it can't be true about you. So that's a good test. If I say I am really depressed or I am confused, it's like, wait, could that be true about God or the divine or whatever you call that?
Mhm.
If it's not true about God, it can't be true about you. So don't claim it. Okay, it may
Mm.
be coming up for you. Lots of pain coming up for me, lots of confusion coming up for me. Okay, so I have this thing that's presenting itself as an option. It's a suggestion. It's not a fact. It's a suggestion. Well, is it a
Mhm.
suggestion that's a good suggestion, or is it a suggestion that's going to take me down a path of fear? So you're always at that crossroads. Am I, when those thoughts come to us, which path is it leading me down? Is it leading me down the path of spirit and love, or is it leading me down the path of fear, limitation, false belief, disease, sickness, whatever? I'm going to choose the path of spirit and love and freedom and inspiration. It's like, take me down that path, because we always have
Mm.
the choice. And that's where the name of my company comes from. This choice matters. Like, what are we choosing to believe as our reality? Are we
Mhm.
choosing the five physical senses in three dimensions, that this is our reality? Or are we
Mm.
choosing a higher reality of spirit and then
Mhm.
seeing the evidence of that, looking for the evidence of good rather than looking for evidence of disease or
Mhm.
looking for evidence of limitation or
Mhm.
something like that? So,
Yeah.
anyway, lots of
No, no,
stories.
I really like that you said, if you could just repeat that, whatever follows I am follows you. Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, we'll come looking for you. Whatever
Will
follows
come
I
looking
am,
for
will
you.
come looking for you. Like, if you state it, you're going to experience it. So state what you want. State the
Yeah.
truth. Don't state the lie.
Yeah. And this is the only power that I have is the power of choice,
Yeah.
right? And that's why it ties back into your name. This choice matters, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only power I have is whether I choose what I want to believe in, whether I choose the direction I want to go into. If I want to
But-
choose to believe that I'm just a physical being with a
Yep.
matter, life, and these five senses, and that's all there is, then that's all there is. Or if I
Yes.
choose to believe something else, then there's something else.
Right. And that's why when people say, well, did God create sickness? Did God create? It's like, no, God doesn't know anything about sickness. But if we choose to separate ourselves from that all power that is love, God is light and in him is no darkness at all. It's just like there is no dark photon. There's just the absence of light. It's like, well, can
Mm-hmm.
there actually be an absence of light? Well, if I separate myself and I turn my back on the light, there's shadow. It's like if I
Mm-hmm.
separate myself from the allness of good and I believe I'm separate, I'm going to experience the pain and suffering of that separation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like God's creating pain and suffering. It's like we all have the option of choosing to think that we're separate. Does God ever stop? If I'm alive, I'm expressing life. Therefore, I'm expressing God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be alive if I weren't at one with God. But if I believe I'm separate, I'm going to feel the effect of that belief. So prayer, there's this, and this again, I quote Science and Health a lot because it's such an amazing book and it has a lot of really great one-liners. It's like prayer doesn't change the fact. It brings us into alignment with the fact, the spiritual reality.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change what is, it brings us into alignment with what is. If we hold ourselves separate from what is, we're going to experience the limitation of that belief.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't need to. And when something looks really bad or feels really bad, when we're looking at a human body, it's like in the human experience, which is kind of this earth school, there's kind of this continuum of thought. You know, on one end of that spectrum, you've got very materially based, limited thinking. And on the other end of that spectrum, you have very spiritually based, infinite thinking. So where are you in thought on that spectrum? Where do you hold yourself and your thought? If there's only one mind and you're the reflection of mind and you
Mm-hmm.
claim that, then you're in alignment with who God is, the all intelligent, all knowing, all acting,
Yeah.
all wise, all loving mind.
Yes.
If I'm claiming separation from that, then you're going to have a mixture of good and bad. You're going to have fear and love and
Mm-hmm.
that roller coaster experience of good days and bad days. Well, does God have good days and bad days? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
God's constant.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm always, and this goes back to daily practice, if I'm always establishing my day on the foundation of God good, and that's the platform out from which I experience life. I look out from that platform. It's like I look up, I look in, I claim it, I stand there, and then I look out from that platform. I have a very different experience than if I start, I'm not worthy, I'm less than,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm groveling my way to try to sort of find things to add
Mm-hmm.
to myself. It's like, hang on, that's not the reality. I'm made whole and complete already. So it's a different way of seeing ourselves, a different way of looking out on the world.
Yeah.
We can look at other people and wish they would change, or we can change the way we're seeing them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get anybody else to change, but you can change the way you
Right.
look at them.
Right.
And then you hear
Right.
that Wayne Dyer quote. The if you want to see something different, change the way you're looking at it. The things you look at, I always forget how he says that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a couple
Things,
different ones like that. I mean, um,
yeah.
where the energy goes, the focus, where the focus goes, the energy flows. And if you don't like
You want to
it,
change the things you're looking at, the things you look at. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
yes, that's
That's
it. That's the
yeah.
second one.
When you
Yes,
change
yes,
the way
yes.
you look at things, the things you look at change, which is true
Exactly.
because
Yes,
human
yes, yes.
experience is the reflection of human consciousness.
Yeah,
So choose, like
yeah,
choose ye this day whom ye shall serve. Like what are you serving? Are you serving matter? Or are you serving spirit? Are you serving love?
yes.
Or are you serving fear? Are you serving limitation and lack? Or are you serving unlimited, infinite abundance?
Mm, mm.
We have a
S-
choice.
So we look up, we
Yes.
look in,
Yes.
and then we look out. Let's talk about looking out.
Looking at, well, we just touched on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
how am I viewing? If you look at this, is easy to it's easy to see this in relationships. If I look at my partner and I see something that I don't like and I want
Mm-hmm.
them to change, I don't really have any control over changing them, but I can change the way I'm looking at them. If I'm looking at them, say my partner is this isn't true at all because I have a wonderful partner, but say my partner is
Mm-hmm.
really selfish
Mm-hmm.
and he keeps like hoarding things. And it's like, why can't you just be more generous?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm seeing him as selfish. So my experience of him is going to be him being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But if I change the way I see him, now what does that mean? It means if I'm seeing him as selfish, then I am claiming, like you talked about before, I'm labeling him something negative. So just
Mm-hmm.
like I don't want to say I am selfish, I don't want to say he is selfish
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
God's not selfish. That's
Right.
not his divine nature. So I've got to correct my view of him. Well, what does that mean for me? I've got to go, if I'm looking out and I'm seeing a problem, I've got to look in and go, okay, what do I know of God? What do I know of me? And that's going to be reflected in how I'm seeing other people. So if I'm looking out and seeing problems and I'm not seeing the reflection of good, I'm looking for evidence of a problem. I'm looking for evidence of limitation. I'm
Mm-hmm.
buying into the
Mm-hmm.
fact that this person is this way. That's just who they are. And oh,
Mm-hmm.
brother, why
Mm-hmm.
don't they change?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
limiting them.
Right.
I'm the one holding on to that view, that limited view. I get to shift my thought. It's that old Bible thing, take the beam out of your own eye before you take the speck out of the other person's eye.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
get to
Yeah.
shift our thought and our thinking. And that is what affects our experience. So looking out on the expression of what's in thought. When we look out, are we expressing what we know is true, or are we putting on a false front and trying to impress other people?
Mm.
Or are we acting in a way that isn't really aligned with our true self? Is there congruency between who we're showing to the world and who we know we are on the inside?
Mhm.
A
Mhm.
lot of times our behavior tells us and shows, sort of telegraphs, oh, there's a belief you're holding on to about yourself. That's not
Mm.
true. It's a limitation. So if I say, oh, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that, it's like, well, what am I accepting about myself? You know? So I don't know if that answers your question. Does that help?
No, it does. But you wrote that part of the process is to courageously act on their understanding and contribute their unique brilliance to a world in need of their gifts.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
you got to act. You have to act on the truth. You have to act on the true understanding. You don't act on the false belief and
mhm.
take that as your model. You act on the truth. So there are times when, if you're afraid to take a step forward and your actions are not actually demonstrating what you want to be true, it's like wishing, wanting, hoping is different from knowing. Wishing, wanting,
Mm.
hoping is different from committing to
Mm.
understanding, demonstrate.
Mm.
So we are the ones that need to shift. If we're going to act in accordance with what's true, a lot of times we need to shift into that place of claiming confidence, clarity, that affirming, like where people talk about affirmations, affirming
Mhm.
what is true about me, even if I don't quite believe it yet,
Mm.
even if I haven't quite demonstrated yet. Claim it and then step confidently out to demonstrate it. And the more we claim it first and then express it, the more we're going to see the evidence follow the thought. It's like it builds on itself. When you have the capacity to do it, it's in the doing that we find our path, is another one of my
Mm.
little
Yes.
phrases.
Yes.
It's in the being that we find the doing, it's in the doing that we find the path. But we
Mhm.
need to we need to claim who we are, and then we're able to do it. We can't go out
Mhm.
and try to do it unless we're claiming, this is who I am.
Yeah. I've dealt with a lot of thinkers in my life. And so I came up with this saying many years ago: you can't think your way into a new way of living. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking, which then changes how you're living.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That
Like,
it's not
who are
about,
you?
it's, yeah. Yeah.
If you can see who you are, you can be who you are, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
choose to be
Yes.
you. Be, it's being, doing, having, right? It's not having or doing, having, being. It's like, I'll be happy when I have, no, I'll actually, when I'm happy, then I'll see it expressed in having stuff. But I'm not
Hmm.
going to have stuff, and that's not going to make me happy. You can't build happiness from the outside in.
Yeah. Yeah. So many times people get trapped off into future pacing themselves,
Yep,
and it's be, do, have,
exactly.
not
Have.
have and then be, do, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would you like people to know about the choice matters? Like, what's the most important thing that you want the audience to know about the choice matters?
This choice matters. Well, the choice that you, number one, that you have a choice, that you don't have to accept what the world, the evidence of the outside is telling you is reality. That you have a choice to say, hang on, all of this evidence is telling me a story, but I know a higher story that I can turn to, that I can acknowledge, that I can accept the power of, and I can demonstrate my dominion over this five physical senses, three-dimension world by claiming that higher reality. We
Hmm.
all have the choice to do that because it's available to everybody. It's a science. And there is a religion by the same name, but some people aren't religious, and that's okay. You don't have to be religious to
Mm-hmm.
study this Christian Science. A lot of times the word Christian throws people off, but
Yeah.
you can just think of it in terms of love. Like the Christian part of it is the love part of it, and
Mm-hmm.
the science part of it is the law part of it. Like this is the law of love. It's
Mm-hmm.
the law of good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you have a choice to live by the law of good, not by the laws of limitation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the choice. And everybody has the choice available to them. It's, you know, it's like the rain falls on the good and the bad, the sun shines on the good and the bad. This law is governing all of us, whether you want to accept it or not, it's governing you. If you turn your back on it and act not in accord with it, great. You'll, deal with the effects of your own beliefs and your own decisions, but you can act in accord with it and then have the benefits of that, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. It's a lot. It's freeing and gives you the opportunity to find a different path that is full of healing, full of abundance, full of health. I mean, the only time I've ever been to a doctor really is that time with my dad when I was 11. And when I've had to get shots to travel or different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had both kids at home
Mm-hmm.
with no medication, pain-free birth. One of them, the first one, there was a bit of fear there, so the fear translated to pain. But when I overcame the fear, the pain went away. So there's a lot of demonstration. I used to wear glasses, had a complete healing. Don't wear glasses anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lots of different healings of physical stuff. But more than that, it's a way of thinking. It's a
Yeah.
way of approaching
Yeah.
life and seeing life differently and seeing that we have options, that we're not locked into what the world is
Mm-hmm.
trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to buy into all the advertising of sickness and disease that is in front of us all the time. Big pharma is selling sickness so that they can sell you the drugs and make money. It's like don't buy into it. Don't accept it. Stand porter at the door of thought. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important. Mute the commercials.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the hypnotism, the propaganda of sickness. It's not, don't buy into the limitations of age. Don't buy into the limitation on either end of that. You're too young. No, you're too old. It's like, who says? Like, don't buy it. Rebel against all this stuff. It's like
Mm-hmm.
choose to rebel. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people can, I mean, if anyone's interested, I do have a daily show that I do called Morning Metaphiz, and you're welcome to try it for free. It's if you go to thischoicematters.co, go to my website, thischoicematters.co, and there's a button in the upper right. Just try 1 week free
Mm-hmm.
trial and see if it
Mm-hmm.
aligns with you. See if kind of starting your day with these metaphysical ideas and these metaphysical laws sets you up for a better day and
Mm.
puts you in that consistent practice. Because being in a community of people that are doing this, you start to feel the momentum of that. And it's amazing what this community of people, I mean, people getting off medications and walking when they couldn't walk before, and
Mm.
having just better relationships and just so many things that you see all the growth for when people decide that they're going to choose differently and they're
Mm.
going to base their life on a different model, a different level.
Mm.
It changes everything. So,
What do you think are two or three misconceptions and misunderstandings that people have about intuition and this metaphysical practice?
one, that it doesn't work for me. I think that's a big misconception. Oh, I can't do that. It doesn't work for me. I don't have intuition, or I don't have that still small voice. I can't hear it. It's like practice. Don't count
Mm.
yourself separate. It comes built in for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So just acknowledge that as a good start, and then practice listening, practice tuning in, and do the blue feather experiment. Start with little things and play with
Mm-hmm.
it. Like have fun with
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Misconception would be I have to be religious to follow these ideas because Jesus was a religious figure. It's like, no, you don't have to be religious. Do you need to acknowledge there's a higher power? Whatever you call that, yes, I would say that's a really good start. You want to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that it's not about you. that definition of ego edging God out. It's
Mm-hmm.
not all
Mm-hmm.
about us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're here to reflect something bigger than us and to bring that gift to the world. So it's not about us being all that. It's about serving. It's about giving. It's about loving others.
Mm.
And we have a gift to give. Everybody has a gift to give. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another misconception that, oh, I don't have anything to give. Yeah, you were created to give. There's a
Mm-hmm.
special gift that you have to give. So learning what
Yes.
that is and giving that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you help people to figure out what their gifts are? Is there a practice for
Lots
that?
of lots of listening. I would say daily practice helps a lot because you got to get past that it's all about me first to see what is it that you're giving. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I would say is kind of an easy access into that. Notice what you really enjoy. Notice what are those activities when you lose time, when you lose a sense of time and you get completely absorbed in something and you really enjoy it. That
Mm-hmm.
question, do I enjoy this, is not a frivolous question. It's actually a really telling barometer about what is right for you. There's a
Mm-hmm.
rightness for when we enjoy stuff, it's telling us there's a rightness here. There's
Mm-hmm.
something that I really enjoy, something that feeds your soul. Like, notice what those things are, and it's leading
Mm-hmm.
you on a path, and keep following those, and it will lead you to what is our purpose? To be us, to be fully who we are, to be fully embodied in the presence of who we are, to
Mm.
be fully in alignment with our highest self, and to let that be what the world sees, not some polished version of it that we've created.
Mm-hmm.
Let it be
Mm-hmm.
what we were created to be. It's not
Mm.
about us curating it. It's about us stripping away the curation and being who we were created to be. That is your purpose.
Yeah.
You were created to be you. So choose to be you as you were
Yes.
created to be and strip off all of the falsities.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. For more information and monthly topics of interest, please go to transformyourfuture.com and join our newsletter.